Welcome back to Scripture Shared. We are so glad to be with y'all this week. David and I are looking forward to talking more about this final few things that Jesus does closing out his public ministry. So let's just start talking about these readings for this week. We are looking mostly at this time in which Lazarus dies and Jesus comes and sees Mary and Martha, and then he eventually resurrects him. But let me just start here. As soon as Mary and Martha greet Jesus, they both say the same thing to him, which is, Lord, if you were here, this would not have happened.
Oh, yeah.
Do you ever feel or find yourself like pressing God in that same way? Like, God, if you were a part of this, or if you were paying attention to me or whatever, then this isn't how my life would go.
Yeah, often. Then there's this other voice that comes into my head that goes, well, why not me? Why not me? Why should I be any different from these other people here? So I do sympathize, though, with Mary and Martha. I totally get it. And that other voice goes, well, maybe I'm not so special.
So the thing that does happen with Jesus and Mary is that he weeps whenever he sees her, whenever he greets her, and she tells him that Lazarus is dead. And we always read this as this really human side of Jesus that is so sad that he's lost his friend. A lot of scholars think, because the Greek word there for weep is also the same word that has this connotation of grief as well as anger. That Jesus wasn't weeping out of grief, that he was weeping out of anger, because he's done this whole public ministry. He knows he's coming to the close of his public ministry, and people still don't get it. They're still saying to him, like, well, if you were here, this wouldn't have happened. Like, they don't understand his divinity. So what do you think it is, grief or anger?
Why can't it be both? What wasn't planning on this, but what came to mind is we buried a young adult. You may remember this over at Gethsemane a while ago. Almost 18 years old. And I was sad and angry, very angry. And I found myself getting teary and mad. I mean, grief comes out that way sometimes. So I would go, why not both and, right? Yeah. He's definitely sad. He's got to be sad that here's one of his buddies who's gone, and he's just so mad about it. Why must he go now? Why don't these people understand me? He'd be both sad and angry about that.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because the Gospel of John over and over again is trying to paint Jesus as the God we can know, right? Jesus is God in flesh, but also like real and here with us. And that's what all those I am statements with the everyday objects are. And this to me is one of the best pictures of the God we can know, is the God that grieves with us. Like when we are missing someone, Jesus, who can overcome life and death, is still there grieving with us. And I think that picture is really important for us to hang on to.
I do too.
So we move in then to the resurrection, where he actually does overcome death and he raises Lazarus. And I am used to that story, like to the point where it is just like, oh yes. And then he raises Lazarus, and then they try to kill him, and then he is anointed. And it's like
amazing how we can get used to that in the Bible.
That's right. And it's like, hold on. A man was dead. He was dead for 4 days, which is interesting that the scripture says that, because the Jews believed after 3 days that the soul had left the body. And it was like, that is dead. There is no coming back at 4 days, right? I think that's a really important detail there. And then Jesus brought him back to life. What happens when you stop for a minute to just really think about that? Is a big deal.
I mean, it helps me to go to the characters in the story. So, reading this, we go, okay, this happened.
Right.
Well, what if you're Mary? What if you're Martha? What if this is the person you've known your entire life who chased off bullies when you were a kid? If this is Lazarus, he'd probably be the breadwinner for these sisters. Now the breadwinner of the home is gone. Like, not only are they sad because their brother died, but this just has so much. There's so many layers there. So what if you're them? And here comes along Jesus, who brings them back. That really adds power to it. When I go, oh my gosh, not only does this mean death, life after death, but now the breadwinner's back.
Yeah.
Right? My big brother's back.
It changes our lives.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Tom and I had talked about this a few weeks ago in week 5 about the difference between resurrection and resuscitation. And this sense that what happened there is they thought, oh, Lazarus has been resuscitated. Our breadwinner is back. Our brother is back. But like resurrection is a whole new thing. It's not just coming back to what was. It's not bringing back to life the thing that was dead exactly as it was. It's bringing back all these new possibilities when something comes to life.
It implies change. That's a piece about resurrection we kind of don't notice a lot. Because I do believe in physical resurrection. I also believe in the spiritual resurrection in this life, right? But for there to be new life, something's got to die, right? There's got to be some cleaning out, some clearing out of stuff. And that's the big difference for me between resurrection and like resuscitation. Something has changed in your life. You've let something go.
Right.
Something stinks, right? Like
Lazarus stinks.
You go, something stinks in my life, and I got to get rid of this. We just have to ask ourselves: are we really to get rid of the stinky parts? Are we really willing to go through the hard step of change in order to experience the new life of resurrection?
I think that's the question that we have to ask ourselves about anything we're struggling with is, do we really want resurrection, right? Like we have to think outside the box because it is so easy to just say, no, I just really want that old relationship back, or I just want that old job back, or I want my kids to keep living at home and not move out. And all of that is just the same old.
I want to keep not liking the same people I don't like.
That's right.
Right? It's very, very convenient for me. Right? But that's not resurrection.
No, it's not. Okay, so this is weird timing too, because this is the thing that sets the Pharisees off. And this is the thing that sets the Jews off, as opposed to the tables being turned over, which I know you and Tom talked about in week 1. That in the synoptics is the final straw. But that happens so early in this gospel. Whereas here, the final straw is Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. Why do you think that is the final straw in John's picture, right? In the story that he's painting about who Jesus is, why is that the one that sets them off?
I mean, the big word that comes to mind is fear. They're afraid. So I just want to call our attention to chapter 11, verse 48. The Pharisees say, if we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and destroy both our holy place and our nation. Right? So not only are they afraid that their Jewish brothers and sisters are going to really abandon the synagogue, abandon the organized religion and go with Jesus, they're afraid of even the consequences of that. This Jesus is going to have a big following. The Romans are going to come and just get rid of everything we've built and worked so hard for. Again, change. They are afraid of change. Who isn't? Right? Jesus for them is this pioneer of so much newness. And they're just too afraid of the pain that new would cause. And they're just not going to get on board.
It's interesting because I think there's also economic parallels in both, right? So like we always think of the money changers at the temple. Jesus upset their economic system at the temple of how they basically made money off of the sacrifices. And in the same way here, as he says this, the Romans will come and destroy our holy place and our nation. It's like the economic system that we have set up, that we have a tenuous relationship with the Romans. They've allowed this. All of a sudden, we're not going to have that same autonomy. We're going to be under their thumb. And so that really seems to be a common denominator there.
It does make you wonder, and I ask myself this question too, like how much change am I willing to go through to follow Jesus? Like, is there a point past which I'm not going to change anymore? I'm not going to give up anything else for this guy. And the Pharisees, they had a line. They had a line, and it was very low. They weren't going to give up much at all.
Right.
In every single gospel, everybody has a line.
Right.
Even Peter, he has a line.
Right.
It makes me wonder what that line is.
It's an interesting prayer for us, which is that God would continue to push that forward, like that we would grow more and more in the things that we thought we wouldn't be willing to change for, that God would continue to expand our understanding in our hearts so that we are willing to give up more and more for Jesus. So the last thing that happens this week when we conclude is when Mary anoints Jesus with the nard, with the spikenard, the really expensive, fancy perfume that she wasted all over him, at least according to Lazarus, right? Like, what a waste. So it makes me think, what are those things in our lives that we need to be willing to pour out for Jesus? It's kind of like what we were just talking about. What is past that line? What are we willing to give up? Are you willing to give up your family? Are you willing to abandon, everything all of your possessions? But even more, in an everyday question for us is like, are we willing to give up the status we have at our jobs? Are we willing to give up, some friendships, things like that? What would be worth pouring out?
I mean, my members over at Gethsemane will know this because I've talked about this in sermons before. For me, it's even more nefarious than that. It's my need for approval. Like it's my line. It's my line. That is the thing that I gotta pour out. Everything else you named too, right? Like, but that for me would be it. What about for you?
That's good. I think mine is similar. I think that I need to, what Mary did here is she gave up something that offered her a future, right? This is her dowry. This is her promise. And she was willing to put that aside. And I think mine is a little bit the same way. Like, I love to have control over my life. I want to manage my future. I want to make sure it goes the exact way that I want it to go. And so I need to be able to give up that security, that sense of like, here's the next step and the next step and the next step, and just leave it and say, if I'm going to follow you, I'm going to trust like Mary did that you will provide for me in all of these next steps.
There's one piece about the nard that I found just so beautiful. You would think that Mary would have used the nard on Lazarus. And she doesn't.
She doesn't.
She doesn't. She has this maybe this little bit of faith that maybe Jesus can do something about this. And then she gives that faith back to Jesus. That's some faith, man.
That's beautiful.
I hope that faith for everyone, for myself and everyone watching today. So thank you for being with us, friends. We will see you next time. I hope you have a really great discussion in your group. May God add a blessing to your reading, to your listening, to your wrestling with the Scripture.